Hey, good afternoon. Today, we're going to be diving deep into the heart of a dilemma that every working professional grapples with, and that's work life balance. I have my friend here, Jossie Haines, who's going to talk with us about it. Josie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation. So, I've spent 23 years in the tech industry and left my corporate gig as the VP of software engineering at Tile last year. And I am now an executive coach for women leaders in tech.
Okay, that's great. I also want to talk about the executive coaching because that's not an area that I think is very interesting to people. All right, let's dive right in. Work life balance, that's kind of a paradox for a lot of us. So, how do you define that? And what is your take on work life balance?
So, I actually prefer calling it work life integration instead of balance because balance, like, it's hard to balance the two things, right? But it's really about figuring out, hey, how do we put this together in a way that actually works for you? And it's individual for each person. I think that's the crux of the problem.
I think that's good. Yeah. So, how do you integrate them so they work together? I think that's a great point. So, say more about that. How do you integrate them then?
Yeah. So, I think as leaders, right, having been a leader for 13 years, it's really about almost setting an example for the rest of your team. And so it can be things like realizing I need to do Pilates 3 times a week. So, for example, when I was at Tile, people knew I had Pilates at noon, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And you could book over pretty much anything else in my calendar. But if you tried to book over my Pilates, I would not join that meeting. And so it's really about being clear on being able to set those boundaries for, again, what are the things that are important to you? And it doesn't always have to be like an hour stretch of time, right? Microsoft actually did some really interesting research near the beginning of COVID and saw that if people watched Headspace for, I think it was like 5 minutes, or listened to the Headspace meditations for like 5 minutes between Zoom meetings, that would actually help them get out of like flight or flight. But if you were in Zoom meetings all day without anything like that, you're in serious fight or flight by the end of your day.
Yeah, the Zoom meetings are crazy, right? Because you go from one meeting and then you don't even have a break. Like in the old days,
Yeah.
walk to another room. You have a second to think, okay, what happened there? What am I going to say at the next meeting? But you go immediately from one to the other. Okay, but let's be real though. If you put a meeting like Pilates on your calendar, a lot of people are going to be like, no, well, no, Josie, you can't do
Right. And that's why as VP of engineering, and if I did that, that meant my employees felt okay being able to do that too. And so that's why I think it's all about as leaders setting an example that like self-care is okay, right? This allows moms to be able to say, hey, between 4 or 3 and 4 or 4 and 5, like I need to go do school pickup and I'm gonna go do the rest of my work later, right? This is what actually enables having more inclusion and diversity on your teams. So it's crucial. And here's the thing, if we don't let people do these things, they're going to perform worse at their day jobs. So it is actually beneficial to the companies to allow people to do these things. And going back to the meetings, just end your meetings 5 minutes early for a 35 for a 25. So it's 25 and 50 minutes. So you get a 5 minute break between your Zoom meeting.
okay. Um, I mean, if you're the VP of engineering, you can do that, right? But let's say you're not that, right? Let's say you work in a place, and a lot of places where they expect you to work really hard, right? Like we could name some of these companies. What do you do there if you're like a lot of our listeners, they're not in charge of that?
Hey, you can still set aside time on your calendar. You don't actually have to even label what you're doing, right? Like I was very explicit. Like I said, I put Pilates because I wanted people to see, like, hey, I was focusing on my self care. If you're an IC at a company, just set a meeting. You could even make up who you're meeting with if you need, but just
Make
block
up what you
time on the calendar, right? And like I said, it doesn't always have to be like an hour-long chunk of time, right? If you can create a culture where you do 25-minute meetings for 30-minute meetings, you can spend those 5 minutes go at least walk around your house if you're working remotely, right? Or do something. Like I said, listen to a 2 or 3 minute meditation, do something to take care of your mental health. Because, like I said, you're not going to perform at your best if you're not focusing on these things.
Okay, okay. Do you have any other specific do you give advice to people, like, if they're burning out? Like, what do you say?
So I used to go through what I'd call 3 month burnout cycles, and I would take a vacation. I would feel better, and then I'd push myself too much and get my tank to empty, and then I would burn out, and the cycle would repeat itself. And so the big thing I tell people is you need to start listening to your body so you don't wait till your tank gets fully empty to take care of yourself. Once you start noticing, "Hey, I'm feeling tired. I haven't stood up and walked around in hours," right? For those of us with Apple Watches, like, pay attention to that little beep
Yeah,
that
yeah.
says, "Hey,"
Yeah.
like, and so I think the crucial thing for those who are burnt out is start adding, like I said, some of these little self-care things, right? And look at what are your energy drainers and what are your energy enhancers. And so we can go into that a little bit too.
Sure. Okay, let's talk about that. What are things energy enhancers and decliners? I'm also thinking, like, are there just some jobs in tech that just aren't good for work-life balance that maybe you should avoid, and some that are better?
Well, I mean, I think if we all start insisting that we create better cultures where, we have better work life integration. But what I also see, and especially see this with women, is this belief and fear, especially in the current financial climate and economy, that we just have to keep over delivering, right? But here's the secret, like sometimes we're trying to do way too much and much more than we actually need to be doing to be effective at our job. And there's fear coming into play. So I think that's one of the things. But going back to energy drainers and energy enhancers, right? So often we talk about things like, meditating, getting good night's sleep, spending some time moving as you're eating well, right? Grounding yourself with your feet on the soil, right? Can like actually, these are all your energy enhancers. And people talk about that a lot. But what they don't talk about as much is you have a lot of things that actually are draining your energy, not drinking enough water, consuming alcohol, potentially drinking too much coffee because it can actually mute the signals that say that you're tired, not processing your emotions, eating like really rich or heavy processed foods, procrastinating. These are all your energy drainers. And if you take some time to really look at those things and really evaluate where are these potential drainers and can you start reducing some of them and getting rid of them? I realized I was drinking way too much coffee and now I've limited it down to like 1 cup a day. It was that painful? Yes. But I've really learned to be able to now listen to my body when I start getting tired.
So, coffee. Yeah, I think software engineers, like the joke, software engineers in the Navy, run on coffee. And, okay, let me ask another thing. Is in our industry, like, a lot of people idolize this grind culture, working really hard. You see people like Elon Musk, right? He sleeps on the factory floor. Okay, he says, and he works like 100 hours a week. So, um, what's your view on that? Since you're into work-life balance, why is this so idolized in our industry?
Well, I think it's because of this like very much hustle and grind, just get to the next outcome, like very male dominated driven culture, right? But one of the things is I have a client who works at one of the FANG companies and she's able to get her job done in 25 hours a week because she's really been able to prioritize. Does she go around telling everybody like this is what she's doing? No, but she's successful. She's on track to get promoted potentially. And so you can do it. It's just about really being good at setting your boundaries, being clear around what your priorities are. And so I think it's easier to hustle in some ways, right? And again, because it's what gets praised, that's what people do. But it creates this culture of burnout Why is it that the average stay at most things is actually less than 2 years? I think I saw that the average at Google was like 1.3, at Amazon
Really?
it's around 1. Yes.
Wow.
Because people are getting burnt out and they are leaving and going and finding other companies where they might have better balance. And so it's if companies actually want to have good, successful, long-term employees, we need to be addressing this.
I want to talk a little bit about coaching, consulting, because I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
people who are interested in that. Um, and so let me ask you, what was a critical moment when you decided to transition from being an engineering leader to a coach, and why?
Okay, so I'll have to give a little backstory here. So, as I mentioned, I've been in tech for 23 years, and I worked at Apple for 2 years from 2016 to beginning of 2018. And when I left Apple at the end of 2018, I was burnt out. I was going through imposter syndrome. I thought it was an awful manager, despite people telling me I was the best manager they ever had. And so I took 6 months off, said, I'm leaving tech. I'm going to do something else. I'm done with this industry. Ended up realizing two things. I love the tech industry. I've been playing with computers since I was 5 years old and I had a Commodore 64. So I was not going to leave tech. And technology was impacting our daily lives so much more than when I had first started doing this in 2000. But yet it was not addressing the needs of women and other underrepresented minorities. So when I joined Tile, I said, I'm doing this under my rules this time. And I want to work somewhere where inclusion isn't just lip service. And so I spoke to the CEO before I joined and I said, hey, if you want me to join as your platform engineering director, I also want to lead your DEI efforts. I want to start a mentoring program. And I'll also be an amazing engineering leader. And he surprised me and actually said, I promised my wife and daughters I was going to make Tile the best place for women to work in the Valley. And so I love that. He hired me and delivered on the promise, created an amazing inclusive culture with a number of other people at the company, started that mentoring program. I then got my boss promoted to CTO, myself to VP of engineering so that we could then scale the organization from 29 to 55 engineers in 4.5 months in the middle of COVID while keeping the inclusive culture. And I realized I'd done it. And I realized I didn't want to just be doing this one company at a time. And I really wanted to be helping support others in their journeys. And so that's what actually really inspired me to leave in July of last year and start my company.
Okay. Well, sounds like you had a good DEI program there, but let's talk about that because I've been involved in these DEI programs and I've talked to people at DEI programs at other companies, right? And a lot of them
Mhm.
make a big deal about DEI programs, but at the end of the day, they make no difference whatsoever.
Mhm.
They're just like window dressing, marketing. So, what is your thought on why these DEI programs, a lot of them are just like BS? They don't work.
It is true so often because they're trying to keep it as this like little separate nice to have thing instead of fully ingraining it in the business. So I say it's really three phases for building an effective program for DEI. The first one is developing inclusive leaders. And that means the leaders have to commit to this as a learning journey, understand that being an ally means admitting your mistakes and being vulnerable and holding them accountable to that in their performance reviews. The second one is defining core values and practices that that show these ways of working, right? You want inclusive things like inclusive meeting practices, right? Making sure you're actually looking at your promotion and pay gaps and addressing them, right? Looking at this holistically. And so often I see companies focusing just on the diverse hiring part, but they have no looks at how to actually build an inclusive culture. And that is where the revolving door comes. And so that's where the third part of this is crucial because it's about then tying these goals into your business OKRs. And again, holding the leadership accountable to these things. And so that is really where the magic happens. And that is where we end up falling really short of this because even though it's been shown that if you actually focus on this and inclusion and high performance are actually very directly correlated with a lot of very similar values if you we don't focus on that in the tech industry.
Yeah, what's interesting because tech industry, you focus a lot on these metrics. Obviously, what's revenue, you want to grow, daily active users, you want to, engagement, all these things. So, what strong evidence do you have, that diversity inclusion actually helps any of those things? And is it just a nice to have?
So, I mean, there's been lots of research done by this that shows that inclusive teams end up being more high performing. And if you have a highly inclusive and highly diverse team, you're more likely to have 30% more profit. You're actually more likely to also thrive in a recession and survive instead of, again, chasing the grind, right? And I think it's very interesting to see if you're looking at a lot of the companies that are still hiring right now, they're not the VC backed companies that are trying to kill people with 100-hour work weeks. It's companies that have been self funded in a lot of cases or found funding elsewhere and are really being intentional about where they're investing their efforts, how they're spending their time. And so I think that that is fascinating and really kind of ties into this.
Okay. Okay. Um, here's the thing I've noticed. Like, we've made progress in the tech industry to a degree, like no one, well, very little, let's say, but in disrespect. Okay, let me clarify. Disrespect, right? People won't overtly say, okay, like, oh, you know, Josie's a woman. We're not gonna pay her as much. We're not gonna give her as important a role. They're smart enough not to say that. But a lot of time they either will do it and not say it, or they won't even think about it. It'd be like an implicit bias,
Hmm.
right? They don't even
Yep.
know. They think they're being very fair, but actually they're not. So, yeah, let's talk about that. Why do you feel that is, or what can be done about that?
And so this goes back to that first part, which is leaders have to commit to realizing that this is a journey that they need to go on. It is not up to the underrepresented minorities at their companies to teach them about these things. And part of it is acknowledging we do all have biases, and they are a lot of them unconscious, but through awareness, we can help limit them by slowing down our thinking at times that bias happens and just bringing awareness to it. Um, I forget what company it was, started at the beginning of their interview feedback sessions. They would just spend like a minute just saying, hey, remember that bias can come up in these discussions. So be sure to become aware of it, right? And just by having that small statement at the beginning, it really actually helped decrease bias in a lot of these conversations. And so often, what I see in tech companies is you get your yearly DEI training and the little check marks got checked, and
Right.
nobody talks about it, right? But it has to, again, that's why I said it's not just about creating lovely little values, it's about then embodying those values in all of your ways of working, having inclusive meeting practices, looking at those, pay gaps and things like that. So it's being thought of and looked at on a daily basis.
I really like that thing you said about when you're starting the debrief to say, hey, bring everyone's attention to that. I think we should do that more
Mhm.
often, right? And also, like when we're doing like calibration meetings, all kind of meetings, right?
Yes.
Where that can be a factor, because it's so easy to just forget about that, and they think, "Wow, we're doing a good job at this." But actually, if you look objectively, we're not. We're actually doing a very bad job at it. Tech industry is much worse than a lot of other industries in this respect. Um,
Yeah. And so, for example, if you're going into meetings, having, the planner look at a little inclusive meeting planning guide that includes things like, hey, are you actually including a diverse population for this meeting? Who are you including? Who are you not including? And are there other people that really should be invited to this meeting? Then when you actually hit the beginning of the meeting, have this facilitator mention, hey, it's important that everybody get some time to communicate. And we don't just have one person dictating the entire meeting and speaking like 80 or 90% of the time, or a small minority speaking 80 or 90% of the time. And you can have a facilitator help facilitate that by making sure to call on people, right? So there's practices that you can embed so that you're doing this on a daily basis. I talk about empathy and code reviews all the time when it comes to engineers as a way to be embodying this on a day to day basis.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we could talk about code reviews, but it's interesting you mentioned facilitator. For me, the facilitator is the manager. Like when I'm in one of these meetings, the manager. So, and I know some people aren't speaking. I was like, hey, like I haven't heard from this person, or what's your thought? But some people just by nature just don't want to speak a lot, and others will talk too much. Um, but it's interesting you mentioned code reviews because yeah, I've seen these stats, right? Like if you're like a woman or underrepresented minority, or if you're older or something, you get like either much harsher code reviews or you get less comments. Like it's just you don't get the same quality of reviews, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's so important to be, again, having empathy as one of your foundations for your code reviews. So things like tone in text kind of really matters because guess what? When we're doing communication, there's so much interpretation that comes from the nonverbal, right? Body language, tone, all of these things. And you don't get that in text. And so text automatically tends to have a negative bias. And so often I see code review comments that start in a very judgmental way. Why did you? Why didn't you? Right? That in and of itself, no matter what you put, if I why did you or why didn't you, is going to put the other person in a judgmental frame. And so I say, look, I'm not telling you you have to overanalyze every single thing you write, but can you come at these from a place of curiosity instead of judgment?
I think that's a great point. So instead of saying, just to make it more concrete, so instead of saying, why did you do this? Right, which it could be interpreted judgmentally, but you do want to come from curiosity. What would you
Mhm.
say if you see something that you really don't know why they did it or you think it's a bad idea?
Yeah.
Like what would be a
So
better way of saying that?
yeah, so let's say there's like a variable that you find in the code that you're like, this doesn't look like it's anywhere. You could just say, why is this variable here? Right? That's very much coming from a place of judgment. You can very much quickly reframe that to, wait, I don't seem to see variable X used somewhere else in this code base. Can you tell me if it still needs to be here? That is coming at it much more from a place of curiosity instead of a place of judgment.
Oh, I see. Okay, so yeah, I don't see it anywhere in the code base. So should it still be here?
Yeah,
Is it here for some reason I don't understand? Like, like,
exactly.
like that. Okay,
Mhm.
got it. You focus on coaching women a lot,
Yep.
right? And so I've had a lot of guests on Managers Club to talk about women, and this is a very interesting topic to me. Um, but may I just hear from you? What are some of the unique challenges that you see women still facing in the realm of engineering?
Yes. So there's a few. One is I tend to work mostly with women who are senior leaders, right? So similar to me, they've been working in tech for over 20 years. One of the things I realized, which is something I actually had a very much a self realization about as I've been running my business, is so often we still are putting ourselves at the bottom of the priority list when it comes to self care. And we're also putting ourselves at the bottom of the priority list. So we never ask ourselves, what is it that we truly want? And and so often, like, we grow up to be these good little girls, right? There's a great book, Rishma Shajani wrote, Brave Not Perfect, that actually talks about this phenomenon, that this actually starts in, like, middle school girls. You see this behavior where we are rewarded for good behavior, and so we've ended up learning to do that, but not really introspect, like, what it is that we want. So that's one thing that I tend to work with a lot of women leaders on is like, what is it that you actually want? Like, are you actually happy at this company? You do not seem happy. So let's talk about what it is that you where you want to be spending your time, what it is that you want to be doing. I mean, going back to biases, like they still show up as we talked about earlier, right? So in a lot of cases, women right now are feeling like, oh my gosh, we're in a double bind, right? Because if you're working at a company, there's an even greater fear that, oh my gosh, I'm going to be laid off. And what's that going to mean for like me and my family and all of these things? And then if you're unemployed and applying to jobs, there's such of this pressure that a lot of women are showing up to interviews very much from a fight or flight point of view and not actually highlighting their best selves because again, they're terrified of needing to hit this next job. And because women believe they need to hit 100% of the requirements compared to men when they're applying to jobs, that is adding even extra pressure because if you're at a company and you have a job and now like oh, some people were laid off and you have more responsibility, now imposter syndrome starts ticking in about like, oh shoot, I don't know how to do that thing. Like, how am I going to have to learn all this right now? Or again, if you're applying, there's this like fear, and a lot of them are showing up from a place of fear and scarcity instead of looking at it from a place of abundance. Right. And I know there's a limited number of jobs right now. So I'm not saying like, let's be completely naive, but how you show up in an interview can really directly impact whether you're going to land that job or not.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm actually working on this problem. Like, so how do you navigate this? This is a real scenario that happens, right? Like, woman comes in and talks about something that she did or her team did, right?
Mhm.
And she's very kind of modest about it. So then people at the debrief will be like, well, maybe she didn't do much or relied on her team. Man comes in and he says, oh, kind of modest. Like, oh, he's very modest because it is viewed differently. But then if the woman is also maybe more like, I don't know, assertive or aggressive about what she did, then that kind of could also turn people off because they have certain expectations of the sexes. So how do you navigate that if you're, to come off correctly in an interview where you're kind of damned if you're too modest, but you're damned if you're too assertive as well?
Yeah, so the aggressive assertive double bind that women face is very prevalent, right? What I tend to see though is women tend to lean way more on the modesty side and even bumping them up a little bit to start talking more about their contributions ends up being kind of the effective thing to do. And they don't have to be like, oh, I did this thing and come at it from a totally boastful point of view, but I focus on impact statements with a lot of the women that I'm working with. So, how did the behavior or actions that you took and your accomplishments directly tie back to the business goals? And especially, like I said, most of the women I work with are leaders and senior leaders. And so, for those types of roles specifically, it is really crucial and game changing if you can say, hey, this had a 30% impact on the bottom line. Or, like I said, I grew my team from 29 to 55 in 4.5 months in the middle of COVID. People understand these numbers and I'm not saying it with an aggressive tone. And so I think it's that balance of being able to clearly boast about what you did because a lot of these women have done a lot of amazing things, but without having an aggressive tone to it and making sure you're including your team in it. I think that's where a lot of times women end up getting discredited is they say, oh, she's not talking about her team and how they helped out too. So it's about, hey, I led this team and I helped them with these things so that they could accomplish these goals, right? And so you're crediting yourself and you're also crediting your team.
Okay. Um, I want to talk a little bit more about like consulting because I think a lot of people that listen to Managers Club are interested in that.
Mhm,
So, um, jumping from a job, you may have a stable job at one of these tech companies, and now you jump to be a consultant or a coach, right? More
mhm.
self-employed. That's like a big risk and an uncertainty. So how did you manage that, or what would be your advice to people who maybe want to follow what you did?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I've realized, and actually my 1 year anniversary is coming up on July 5th right now, is I did not understand how much building my own business was going to be a personal self development journey as well. Because the things that you sometimes ignore or put aside, like people pleasing, oh, they show up 110% in your business. So, first, it's a realization that going back to the beginning of our conversation around work life integration and the need for self care, your need for self care when you're a business owner is actually going to increase. And so, working on your mindset is crucial for being a successful business owner. The other thing is running a small business is basically like flying a plane and building it at the same time.
Mm.
And as engineers, sometimes we really want to have like the step by step plan and try to get this outcome. And imperfect action is so much better than no action at all because it really is about testing and experimenting and learning. You're not going to have the perfect marketing message from day one, right? And especially if you're going into coaching or advising, you can listen to a ton of business gurus who are going to tell you, like, post on LinkedIn a million times a day or set up an email list. And again, as engineers, we love to build things. So it can feel really easy to be like, "Ooh, if I build it, they will come." But what actually has made my business successful and grown is much more focusing on building relationships because this is a relationship business. And people buy when they believe that you truly understand their problem in a unique way. So it's about having conversations with your ideal client, writing down exactly the language that they use about their problems and helping them bridge the gap from what their problem is to the ideal outcome they want to get to. And your solution's in the middle there. And again, as engineers, we love talking about the solution. So I see a lot of people focusing on like how to content and talking about the solution. And not that that isn't like you want to do some of that, but it is also important to be talking about the problems these folks are having. What are your aha moments? How do you do this differently from other people? And that's really, again, what gets the sales.
Okay, okay. Let's flip it back now since we started talking about work-life integration and balance, okay? What's your day like? What's the day like if you're a coach, consultant? How do you do that in your day-to-day, if you could share?
So, yeah, one of the reasons I went into this journey is I wanted more freedom and more flexibility in my day to day, right? As a VP of engineering, I used to have maybe a 30-minute lunch break outside of my Pilates breaks, and that was it, right? I can now take an hour and a half lunch if I want to schedule one in. A few Mondays ago at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I took a 2 hour walk with one of my former colleagues in the Baylands here in Palo Alto. And so I think that is the thing. But you also have to be disciplined about how you're spending your time. So for me, Mondays and Fridays, I don't tend to book a lot of meetings. I might book something like this. Today we're recording on a Monday, but typically I keep my Mondays pretty free. And that's when I work on my business. So I have my top three priorities for my business that I'm currently working on. And so I spend time on Mondays working on those activities. Then my Fridays, I try to end my day early. So I usually do a few things in the morning. I meet with like one of my coaches. I uh, have a mentoring call with one of my mentees in Belarus, and then basically try to end my day by I do my Pilates at 12:45 on Fridays, and I try to end my day like by that, and then doing something for myself in the afternoon. And then so I schedule my meetings Tuesdays through Thursdays. And even then, though, I break it up. So I think I do at most two coaching calls a day. Sometimes I have three, but I'll make sure I space out at least 15 minutes between them. So I have some time to refresh, look at, hey, what do I want to focus on next? Go do a little meditation, go sit in my backyard and look at nature if I want to. And really be focused on what are the most crucial things I need to be doing to move the business. Because guess what? Your to do list is going to infinitely grow. And
True.
you're always going to have more things on your to do list than you actually have time for. So it's really about looking at which of these things is actually going to be bringing me in money and which of these are really nice to haves or and not just bringing me in money. Bringing me in money or what are things that are going to long term save me time, right? Because time is the one thing you're not getting back. And so those are the two angles that I look at things. And I also try to make every decision from the point of view of, hey, what are my three priorities? And is this aligned to this, or is this a nice to have? This is where that mindset piece comes in, right? So often we can be making decisions from a place of fear or uncertainty, especially for something that we haven't done before. And so we can think, oh my gosh, I need to go research a million and one ways to start an email list and go down, I call it the Google rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And you can spend hours going down that rabbit hole, right? And I'm not saying that training isn't an important part potentially, but it's about limiting that and looking within too and realizing like you have the answers inside of yourself in a lot of cases. Or the right things to be doing is again talking to your customers and understanding what their challenges are and really speaking to that.
I think that's very well said because the nice thing is you have total control of your time, right? When you're a business
Mhm.
owner, which is great. But that's also the real challenge because you could really waste your time. You could do the wrong thing. You don't, there's a million people telling you what you could do, but you have to
Mhm.
decide what to do. And you only have so much time. If you make the
Yep.
wrong choice enough, you're going to be in big trouble. So um, that's kind of the blessing and the curse of it at the same time.
Yeah. So I work 30 to 40 hours a week. That's it. I
Wow.
that
Nice.
is that is my goal. Actually, my goal is to get it down to 25. But yeah, right now I average about 30 to 40. And so I think there's also, again, because I'm taxed, there's this whole like grind, grind, grind mentality, right? And there's also this belief like, oh my gosh, we have to work really, really hard in our business. But again, if you're taking the right aligned actions and you're giving your experiments enough time and not just giving up, like, you start some LinkedIn posts and then a weekend you're like, oh, this isn't working. Let me just do something else, right? Because that's coming at it from a place of fear. And so that's really, again, tying back to mindset. You really need to be really introspective about your decisions. What are your priorities, right? And hey, if you want to be working more hours, like that's fine, right? Like for me, I want to be working less hours so I can enjoy life a little bit more, right? And so it's really aligning with your values and running a business that lights you up because hopefully that's why you got into doing this in the first place.
I think that's very well said. Josie, is there anything else I should have asked you? Anything else you share on these topics before you left?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think we touched about on a lot of things. I guess I will just comment on one thing going back to the work life balance and integration piece, which I didn't touch on earlier, which is connection with other human beings is so important for your mental health, which directly ties to work life integration and feeling like you can show up as 100% every day. On May 3rd, the Surgeon General actually released an advisory here in the US saying that we are in the middle of a public health crisis of loneliness, isolation, and lack of connection. So, especially for those of you who are working from home, schedule in some in person coffee breaks, right? Like, there is a difference. Like, I do most of my work on Zoom, and, I connect with folks that way. But there is something very magical about grabbing a coffee with a friend once a week and making sure that that is always on my calendar as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think when we all went to work from home, it was like, great. I don't have to commute, to do any of that. People leave me alone. That was really fun. But now you've been doing it for a couple years. It's like, yeah, it actually is kind of important to see people because these are people. Certainly, if you're trying to, let's say, build a rocket ship that goes to Mars, you got a lot of really hard technical problems that no one's ever solved. But most tech companies aren't that, right? It's more
Right.
people, relationships, what can we do together? And that is very important to do in person. So I
Yeah. And it's actually the lack of connection can increase the risk of premature death to levels equivalent to smoking daily.
wow.
So this isn't just a nice to have.
Yeah, that's great. Josie, you've been awesome. It's great to have you here. If people wanted to reach out to you afterwards and connect, what would be the best?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. That is where I tend to be most of the time. So just connect, add me as a friend, send me a DM, and I'd be happy to chat with you.
Sounds good. I'll put a link in the notes. Thanks again
All
for
right.
great to talk with you.
Happy to be here.